You remember her eyes, not for their color but for the moment they didn't blink. She asked nothing, yet you gave everything. Not because you loved her, because you felt responsible for her sadness, for her silence, for something she never said but let you imagine. And that imagination became your leash. There's a room in your mind where she still stands, arms crossed, not angry, disappointed. You built that room yourself, decorated it with memories she never confirmed, furnished it with your apologies, locked yourself inside and called it virtue. You've met her in different faces, in the girl who sighed when you forgot the little things, in the one who cried without tears, in the one who said, "It's fine," and watched you squirm. Guilt was her kingdom. You were just a servant trying to atone for crimes never named. But ask yourself, what does she gain when you kneel? That's the part you've never dared to answer, until now. She never raised her voice that would have broken the illusion. Mercy never screams. It sighs, it pauses, it turns its face slightly to the side and allows you to fill the silence with self-condemnation. You mistook her restraint for kindness, her coldness for pain. But pain is loud, clumsy, and chaotic. What she wore was not pain, it was precision. You thought she was hurt, but she was only watching you offer your guilt like tribute, like a coin at the feet of a statue that never promised to move. That is the first trap you confessed before being accused. You disarmed yourself without a sword ever being drawn, and once you had surrendered, she smiled not out of forgiveness, but because she had already won. No king is more powerful than a woman who appears merciful. Mercy is the most elegant form of domination. It demands nothing, yet receives everything. It asks no questions, yet earns every explanation. And you, caught in your own sense of moral obligation, offered your spine in exchange for a peace that never came. Because peace was never the prize, only your submission was. You did not see the ritual, the game, the choreography of emotional warfare dressed as tenderness. She tilted her head, said, "I'm fine," and you spiraled into correction, into promises, into atonement for sins she never named. She knew that by saying less, she would make you say more, and every word you spilled was another piece of leverage handed over willingly. Guilt is the leash you tighten yourself. She only had to hold it. There was a moment small, invisible, when you realized she knew, that she understood exactly how your conscience worked, that she had studied your boyhood code of honor, your romanticized belief in accountability, your desperate need to be seen as good. She found the cracks and poured in silence like oil, and you kept slipping. The irony is that the guilt you felt was not even yours. It was manufactured, seeded by gestures, glances, and those exquisite pauses that made you question your integrity. She did not tell you you'd failed her. She let you believe it on your own. And once a man believes he has failed a woman, he will destroy himself to repair the damage, even if the damage never existed. You thought you were saving the relationship, but you were feeding it your authority. Each apology was a payment, each over-explanation a deposit, and in time, you didn't notice how your spine curved. You thought compromise was love. You mistook self-erasure for respect. She never asked you to be small, but she never stopped you from shrinking either, because small men are easier to manage. Now ask yourself, who benefited? Was it not her who always had the upper hand in conflict, who needed only to raise an eyebrow to halt your momentum, who stayed calm while you fell apart? Mercy, when unearned, is a form of punishment. It is a velvet execution. You begged her to speak, to shout, to fight anything but that cold, wounded quiet, because deep down you knew as long as she looked hurt, she had the power, and as long as you looked guilty, you had none. You see, guilt is not a virtue, it is a currency, And the woman who knows how to collect it does not need to argue. She only needs to look away at the right moment. You tried to be honest, but honesty became performance. You rehearsed your sincerity, refined your confessions, believing that transparency would earn you absolution. But absolution was never offered, only prolongation, because as long as guilt lives, control remains. And she, the woman who wrapped silence around your throat, understood that better than you. Remember this, the most dangerous woman is not the cruel one, not the loud one, not even the obviously manipulative one. The most dangerous woman is the one who weaponizes your own decency against you. She does not need to be cruel. She needs only to appear hurt, in pain, slightly broken, slightly disappointed. And you, the man who cannot bear to be the villain, will cast yourself in that role just to prove you're not. You thought love meant sacrifice, but she turned it into surrender, not of your body, of your will. The next time you think of her, don't remember her smile. Remember the moment you begged to be forgiven for something you didn't do. The moment you apologized not because you were wrong, but because she wouldn't look at you. The moment you believed that guilt would buy back affection when affection was never absent, only withheld as ransom. This is not about her. This is about the architecture of power. She just happened to read the blueprint faster than you. She understood that the man who kneels in guilt will never stand in command. She did not need to lead. She needed only to appear wounded. You led yourself into servitude. Now you sit alone, wondering where your authority went, why you feel hollow after every conflict, why you never seem to win even when you're right. You still believe she misunderstood you, but she never misunderstood. She measured, she weighed, she calibrated. And you revealed every weakness in the name of love. But she never declared war. She only waited for your conscience to do the work. That is the brilliance of mercy worn as a mask. It shifts the burden of action to the accused. It allows the executioner to look innocent. It allows the condemned to walk willingly into the sentence. And you walked. Worse, you thanked her for the opportunity to do so. You begged to explain, to prove, to earn her warmth back, not realizing that the warmth was conditional from the beginning, that you were not being loved, you were being tested, and every time you passed, the test changed. You believed she was sad, but what if she was only still? You believed you had failed. But what if failure was the script she handed you? You believed she would forgive. But what if she had no interest in punishment, only in power? The mask never cracks. That is its strength. Mercy is a mirror that reflects only what you project. She never said you were cruel. You saw cruelty in your own reflection. She never called you a coward. You became one trying to deny it, and she silent, calm, untouched, simply remained. Now, do you see? Guilt is not about right or wrong. It's about control. And she knew that from the very beginning. There is a ritual you were never taught but practiced anyway. You walked into the room, shoulders low, voice soft, hands open as if entering a temple. And in the center of that temple, there was no God, no fire, no judgment, only her, not speaking, not moving, not demanding. She didn't need to. You already brought the offering. That offering was your certainty, traded for her approval. You placed your confidence on the altar and called it compromise. You placed your pride next, claiming it was growth. You offered clarity lest your vision of what was right, what was fair, what was true, and watched it burn, just to keep the silence from stretching 1 second longer. You weren't kneeling before a woman. You were kneeling before a void that fed on explanation. but she never offered you her truth in return, because the altar doesn't give, it absorbs. And you kept giving, convinced that enough sacrifice would earn you peace. But peace was not the goal. Peace would have meant closure, and closure would have meant the end of her control. That's the second law of the game. As long as you're uncertain, she retains the throne. You began to doubt your memories, not because you were wrong, but because she didn't confirm them. You'd say, "I never meant to hurt you," and she'd just look away. No denial, no correction, only the sacred act of withholding. You mistook her silence for superiority, for grace. But grace does not make you walk in circles. Grace doesn't keep you second-guessing what you said, what you didn't, and whether your intentions were ever good enough. You once believed honesty would set you free, but in her presence, it only made you more obedient, because every confession fed the altar. Every attempt to clarify, to explain, to lay yourself bare, it all became kindling. And still, you knelt. She never forgave. She moved on, but she moved with your spine in her pocket. Look closer, the altar was built from your own fears, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being unloved, the fear of being seen as cruel. She touched none of those fears directly. That would have been too obvious. No, she let you hold them in front of her, and then let you watch yourself beg for relief. What is control if not the ability to shape another's behavior without ever issuing a command? You changed your tone around her, softer, calmer, measured, as if speaking to a child who might cry or a queen who might not bless you. You walked on glass, not because she asked you to, but because she watched you do it without stopping you. And each time you tiptoed, you confirmed the structure of the ritual she sits. Unmoved, you adjust, explain, diminish. You began to filter yourself, certain truths you withheld, not out of deceit, but out of fear. You censored your thoughts before they were even words. You didn't want to trigger her distance again, that glacier that descended each time you dared to speak like a man and not a supplicant. So you shaved your edges, smoothed your voice, numbed your certainty. She had succeeded. The altar now lived inside you. You now monitored yourself even when she wasn't watching. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering if she'd taken something the wrong way. You anticipated offenses before they occurred. You apologized for things that hadn't happened yet. You internalized her expectations until they replaced your own. This is how a man becomes manageable, not through punishment, but through the slow erosion of his confidence. You didn't notice how rare your laughter had become, how often your eyes sought hers after every joke, every story, just to check, did she approve? You didn't see how often you cut your own sentences short, how you stopped interrupting, not from politeness, but from fear. You gave her not only your guilt, you gave her your rhythm. All this in the name of keeping things calm. But calm is not always peace. Sometimes it is control at rest, dormant, recharging. There were nights she touched your arm and you flinched, not from pain but from memory. You remembered the way she once sat in silence after you'd spoken too bluntly, too fast, too male. The next day, you came with flowers, not because she asked, but because you knew the script. You knew what her quietness cost you. You knew that every cold glance was an invoice, every pause an unspoken debt. She never shouted, but you remember the one time she did just once. It was brief, precise, uncharacteristic, and you never wanted to hear it again. That was the only time she raised her voice, and it worked, because every time after that, she didn't need to raise it. You remembered. You remembered how it felt. The unpredictability, the shiver, the shame. You called it love, but it was behavioral conditioning. Do not mistake calmness for goodness. Do not mistake restraint for virtue. A leash is still a leash, even when it's soft, especially when it's soft. And you gave her the leash. wove it from your own desire to be the man who never hurts, never dominates, never insists. You crafted your own chain in the shape of a virtue and called it kindness. But Machiavelli never worshipped kindness. He understood its power only in contrast as the mask beneath which ambition thrives. A man who leads must not seek to be loved more than he commands respect. And yet, you surrendered respect daily in exchange for the illusion of peace. Ask yourself, when was the last time she adjusted for you? Did she ever soften her tone when you were tired? Did she ever pause to ask whether her silence wounded? Did she ever atone, or only receive? And when she did offer warmth, was it unconditional, or was it reward? You began to think love should be earned, not through trust, but through sacrifice. And once you believe that, you are no longer a lover. You are a subject. You offered loyalty in return for crumbs of softness. You modified your values. You edited your past. You shrank. But she never asked you to. And that's the point. Control is most effective when it feels like your idea. You forgot what it meant to be firm, to be unshaken. You believed that strength would threaten her, so you hid it. But the truth is, she didn't fear your strength. She just had no use for it. Because a strong man is harder to sculpt, and she preferred marble over granite. Now you sit with your hands in your lap, your tongue dulled, your pride folded like a letter no one will read. And she sits unmoved, still merciful, still composed, still waiting for the next offering you will bring. Because you still believe there's one more thing you can give that will finally make her smile without reservation. There isn't. There never was. And she knows that better than you do. You always believed you were building something noble, something rare. You called it love, loyalty, partnership. You wore it like armor, not to protect yourself, but to make your suffering look regal, as if the more you endured, the more valuable the crown would become. But it wasn't a crown. It was a collar. You only mistook it for glory because you forged it from pain. She let you believe you were in charge, that your sacrifices were strategic, your concessions noble, that every time you yielded, you were taking the high ground. And you needed to believe that because the alternative was too shameful to face, that you were not a king. You were a servant crowned too early, paraded through a court that bowed to you only in mockery. What is betrayal, if not the realization that you handed her the throne with your own trembling hands? She never took it. You gave it. There was no battle, no usurpation, only your need to be loved outshining your need to be respected. You abdicated without a fight and called it maturity, but maturity without power is just polite surrender. You thought she admired your restraint, but she only measured how far you would bend, and you bent until you vanished. There's a cruelty in realizing that your identity was shaped by someone who never respected its edges. You once stood tall, you had convictions, lines, a sense of where you began and where you ended. But she redrew those borders with every withheld touch, every well-timed sigh, every distant gaze that made you question your worth. You thought you were negotiating peace, but she was drafting your constitution. You started censoring your desires, rephrasing your boundaries to sound less firm, swallowing your discontent so it wouldn't ruin the mood. You did this not because she demanded it, but because she rewarded it. A smile here, a returned kiss there, as if to say yes. Like that, easier, quieter, less. And you began to mistake approval for affection. Each time you folded, she looked at you not with gratitude, but with curiosity, as if watching a man build his own prison, wondering how long until he notices the bars. She did not chain you. She offered the tools and watched. You believed you were the provider, but she was the architect. She gave you the blueprint of her expectations, disguised as subtle disappointment. And you, desperate to be what she wanted, constructed a palace of compromise and called it love. But compromise without reciprocity is not love. It is a hostage exchange where only one person ever gets returned. There came a point, subtle, invisible, when you realized she did not fear losing you. That's when everything shifted. You began to perform not to connect, but to survive. You watched your every word like a spy in enemy territory. You studied her silences like scripture, hoping for a sign. You read her moods like weather reports, trying to predict the storm. You became her interpreter, not her partner, and she let you, because the man who must interpret her moods will never confront her motives. The truth you never wanted to face is this: she never intended to share the crown, only to see how long you'd wear it before it crushed you. She made you believe it was yours, let you polish it, lift it, pose with it in the mirror, but it was always weighted, rigged, designed to buckle the neck of any man foolish enough to believe that love without respect is still sovereignty. The tragedy is not that you were betrayed. It is that you crowned yourself with obedience and expected to be treated like a king. She did not punish you. That would have broken the illusion. She simply watched as you punished yourself for not being enough, for always being too much, for never saying it right, for saying too much at the wrong time. You thought she was merciful because she didn't strike, but silence can be sharper than any blade, and she wielded it with the precision of a ruler who knows that blood stains, but silence rewrites memory. Now you look back and wonder when it began. When did you lose command? When did the man you were get replaced by this trembling diplomat, always negotiating, always adjusting, always hoping? It began the moment you mistook being needed for being chosen. She needed your guilt, your longing, your need to redeem, but she never chose you in strength, only in your softness, your yielding, your confusion, your usefulness. You weren't her equal. You were her mirror, reflecting what she needed to see: control without confrontation, dominance without blood. You were the throne, not the ruler. And when you finally broke, when your voice cracked with frustration, when you said the truth, when you stopped apologizing, she didn't flinch. She just tilted her head and said, "You've changed," as if change was betrayal, as if reclaiming yourself was an act of violence. But it was too late, because by then, your image had already been assassinated, quietly, elegantly. You were no longer seen as strong, but unstable, not confident, but cold. She did not need to prove you were the villain. She only needed to stop calling you the hero, and everyone around her followed suit. That's how betrayal works in a court of perception. It's not announced, it is murmured, slowly, until the king is dressed for burial while still alive. You wonder now why you feel hollow, why her absence feels less painful than her presence, why, in the silence, you're beginning to hear something that was drowned out for years, your own voice. It is weak now, hoarse, but it's yours. You reach for it like a man buried under stone. You do not know yet how to wield it, but you know this: you would rather be unloved than ruled. You look back one final time, not at her but at the man you were in her orbit, and you see it clearly: the posture, the tone, the lowered gaze, the constant need to be seen as good. And you do not pity him. You do not hate him. You simply understand that he was trying to wear a crown that was never made for a man. You were never betrayed by her. You were betrayed by the part of you that believed that guilt would earn devotion, that being harmless would make you irreplaceable, that sacrificing your edges would earn her loyalty. But love, real love, does not need you to kneel. It meets you standing, and now, for the first time, you do. There is a mirror at the end of the corridor, cracked, dust-veiled, left untouched. You stand before it, unsure if the face inside is yours or just the outline of a man shaped by others' expectations. Behind you, the throne is empty, cold, still faintly warm from your absence. A crown lies at your feet, not gleaming, not golden, wrought from silence, compromise, and 1,000 swallowed truths. You don't pick it up, you don't smash it, you leave it. Outside, the wind does not announce your return. No applause, no lover's arms, only the air sharp, indifferent, clean, and far off, from a chamber you'll never return to, a whisper, you were perfect, once you stopped resisting, but no one is there, only the echo, and you walking away, not to be understood, only to be free.